welcome back to the final session of today. So we got a paper to begin with by Graeme Pauley of PA Consulting. You won't have seen this before, a novel take on the Seven Samurai. We get at least 4 papers every year that are a novel take on the Seven Samurai. So no pressure. So I've been kind of dropped in at the last second. I wasn't supposed to be showing this. So my introduction to Graeme, I must apologise, is very short. But we're very much looking forward to your paper. So without further ado, Graeme, do you want to... Let's have a round of applause for Graeme just for being so patient.
Okay, so... Can you hear? Oh, we've got a mic. Fabulous. So, yeah, it appears I'm carrying on a proud tradition of a novel use of the Seven Samurai. So, hi, as the chair said, my name's Graeme Pauley, systems engineer. I'm employed by PA Consulting Group. And over the next 30 minutes or so, I will share with you how I helped UK government clients apply systems thinking and engineering principles in general, and the Seven Samurai technique in particular to inform online safety. And my story will include a few things. Firstly, online age assurance. Secondly, a manifesto for change. Thirdly, we will be imagining policy futures through Seven Samurai. Fourthly, we encounter a revelation from the local systems engineering community, which came as a bit of a surprise. And then we end with a very brief reflection on the role of systems engineers in policy formulation. And what I should stress for this late session in the afternoon is that I'm an engineer, not an academic. So this is a case study, and it's going to focus what we did and what we learnt, rather than the finer points of academic complexity theory. Okay, so if you're happy with that, we're going to crack on. So, okay, so we must do all we can to make sure that children and young people are protected from exposure to dangerous, inappropriate, or harmful content online. That's the UK Digital Strategy, first published in 2017. Okay, so why is this such a problem? Well, the short answer is complexity, but we need to dig into that a little bit. So why is this an issue? Well, firstly, we have rapid changes in technology and also the speed of communication. And then that's compounded by the usage of that technology by individuals and groups. And all of this over the last decade or so has led to an explosion in reported online abuse and related harm. And then again, all of that has been fueled by the recent lockdown. And it's been a particular problem for children and younger users. And when we start to think about the effective response to that problem, that's mediated by a really complex stakeholder landscape in the UK and overseas. And just to give you a flavour of that, it involves industry, the platforms that operate online. Clearly, it involves children and other vulnerable consumers of digital services. It involves their digital parents, and by digital parents, I mean the people which are in loco parentis. So it could be parents, grandparents, teachers, foster parents, whoever. It includes policymakers, rights advocates, and there you get the whole spectrum from people who are very passionate about ensuring that the internet adheres to its original liberal principles. And then you have rights advocates who are very, very passionate about online safety and everything in between. We have third sector organisations, we have law enforcement, security services, and so on and so on. So we're not going to solve this problem by locking up high-profile offenders. We need to do that. Clearly, we need to stop the harm and damage they're causing. But in order to have an effect on this problem, we have to take a whole systems approach. And in particular, we need to work with that diverse group of stakeholders to help them co-create a positive future. And that's what this talk is all about. So how do we go about addressing such a wicked problem? We're in that kind of Cynefin complex space when we talk about this. And I think Cynefin talks about probing, sensing, then responding. Well, in our case, a team was established with the permission to think big and to back a number of horses, if you like, and to learn really fast from that. And one of those horses was the verification of verification of children online initiative. Okay. Now, this was something which was led by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport in partnership with GCHQ and the Home Office. And it was all about exploring a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is there on the screen. It's about children's online safety and well-being improving if we have an internet that actively recognises children and adapts the spaces they use to make them safer by design. And in order to explore that hypothesis, we applied the Home Office's Accelerated Capability Environment, or ACE. I don't know whether anyone in the room here has come across that, but it's a really excellent approach. It's really powerful and engages a whole bunch of specialist small and medium-sized enterprises to address an area of digital policy and to do it in a really agile way. So you have a number of short fire sprints and really make progress in terms of exploring something. So we had two runs, if you like, with the ACE initiative, exploring this hypothesis. The first was very much about ensuring from a number of different stakeholder perspectives that we had consensus that hypothesis was achievable and that it would actually address the core challenge which was undermining online safety for children. The second phase then focused on how that could be achieved, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. So, during the second phase then, of that initiative, using that ACE construct, we engaged with industry, regulators and crucially children and their digital parents in a number of different settings. And we performed a whole bunch of analysis around age assessment technology, lots of different ways of assessing age, some of them very obvious and some of them really quite funky. We looked at relevant standards. We looked at the commercial implications of industry actually adopting these things. We even developed an end-to-end proof of concept, and that was looking at trust frameworks and a large telecoms provider coming up with a technical proof of concept and using that with parents and kids in a school setting. And supporting all of this, there was a task force of between 40 and 50 individuals which represented all of that broad stakeholder landscape that we talked about earlier. And they were really crucial because they tested the direction of research and helped evolve the conclusions and recommendations and gave them legitimacy because we were working with them to come up with a solution that they all understood. And what we're going to do then is just look at some of those outputs. So I'm going to take a moment to concentrate on age assurance. That was a key output from this research. And what age assurance does is to reframe conventional age assurance or age verification so we can help protect children online in a way that supports their development. And in particular, it respects their rights and preferences as their digital parents. An important thing to note here is that the transition from physical to online commerce has made very little difference in the way that age verification is performed to date. Because it's all about compliance with legislation. We're talking about people selling age-restricted goods, and that could be anything from streaming videos or games to guns, solvents, whatever. The point is, if you're supplying those goods and services, you don't want to break the law. You have to be really certain that you're selling to people which are above the age threshold. And that tends to be really intrusive, because in order to do that, you have to identify the individual and then find some authoritative source that says they're above that threshold. Age assurance is different. Age assurance takes a risk-based approach that forces suppliers to take responsibility to safeguard children rather than restrict their access. And it's a little bit like with banks. We're all familiar now with Know Your Customer. So with online platforms, this is about knowing the age of your users. It's a similar concept. So age assurance doesn't accept walled gardens for the kids to play in. Doesn't accept that. It also doesn't accept step changes in the permissiveness of the environment. And these kind of cliff edges are the effect of age-related legislation like the COPA Act of 1998, which is well-meaning, but what it means is children are encouraged to lie about their age and put themselves at risk. So if we think about that, something is seriously broken when children feel it necessary to lie about their age to have a good experience online. Okay, so we've got to do better than that. We've got to make the internet at least as good for kids as it is for adults, and that was at the heart of this radical VOCO proposition. So, if this was an opera then, I quite like opera, so I'm using that metaphor, we just reached the end of a really long overture, but hopefully it's been quite fun. The curtain's about to raise for the first of 4 short acts about the story of how we applied systems thinking and engineering to influence public sector policy. Before that happens, I'm going to briefly explain my role. So I was assigned to the team responsible for VOCO Phase 2 as a systems engineer with a track record of acting as a systems thinking trainer and coach for this particular organisation. And my remit was twofold. First, to apply systems thinking to help the team pull together the various strands of that research into some sort of coherent, compelling, kind of holistic vision. And the second was to encourage a systems thinking mindset within the team and to develop their competence in appropriate tool sets, which were drawn from a systems thinking training program for the system engineering community, which I had previously helped devise. So, hang on. Act 1 then, curtain raises. So, we had identified, as we said, the need to develop trust between these 3 core stakeholder groups, the online platforms, the parents, the kids. And to do that, we engage with a broad range of individuals, as we described, to understand their needs and wants. And from a system thinking or system engineering perspective, I guess that's really equivalent to the commissioning stage of a typical solution life cycle. So recognizing this, the team tried to articulate the commissioning requirements and to have one for each group with accompanying measures of effectiveness. And these were referred to as the VOCO aims and the VOCO principles, respectively. But the point was, they were balanced across those 3 groups. And collectively, they came to be promoted as the VOCO Manifesto for Change. And the idea of this manifesto was it drew consciously upon the success of the Agile delivery movement, which started with a call to arms in the form of a manifesto. So, as the kind of the curtain falls on this act, if you like, we hear that call to arms in the voices of the VOCO stakeholders. And that sounds harmonious and balanced. And we'll just have a moment to read through the example here. Okay. Sorry. Amen. There we go. And for my next parable. Right. Okay. So, Right, so where are we? Get myself confused, that's where I am. Okay, so let's pause to consider how the drama is developing then. So we've got this accelerated capability environment. It appears to be working well. We've listened to our stakeholders. We've got the concept of age assurance, which has emerged. The various work streams are fleshing out what this means in terms of standards and data sources and commercial implications and so on. We've got this end-to-end proof of concept that's nearing completion, and the task force has collectively agreed and signed off on a manifesto for change. And you can imagine I'm sitting there working with the vision holder for all of this to synthesize this into the final report. Surely we're feeling really good at this stage. Well, no, actually we weren't. The problem was, the more we understood about the potential for this new concept, age assurance, the more we appreciated the gap between where we were now and this idealised future, the VOCO vision. And we felt that some sort of technical research report just wasn't going to cut the mustard. It wasn't going to secure a change. And we wanted to do more than just produce a report. We wanted to actually follow through on that call to arms. So how could we help our stakeholders imagine a positive VOCO future in which age assurance was commonplace? And crucially, how could we make that future compelling and help their minds escape from that kind of prison, if you like, of the present situation? And that's where we get to the Seven Samurai. So, as the curtain raises on our second act, the scene has moved to Japan. And if you like, a group of lawless samurai assemble. You can just see that on the stage, can't you? Their costumes and all that. Very, yeah. Anyway, I'm assuming most people in this audience are familiar with Martin's seminal 2004 in Cozy Paper. But for those who are not, his genius was to articulate a system of systems that collectively described how we should engineer solutions to business problems. And like the Seven Samurai in Kurosaki's movie, it's only when all of these systems are brought together into a holistic kind of solution that we achieve order. And if we neglect one or more of them, it can cause chaos. So to give an example, neglecting the sustainment system means that we don't think how we bring our solution into service properly. And crucially, we don't think about whole life costs. So how many times has that happened when you've worked on a project? A great solution. Oh, damn. We haven't thought about the whole life costs. We don't know who's going to maintain and support and keep this thing running for the next 10 years. Similarly, collaboration systems. There's another good one. I'm sure a lot of you in this room are probably involved with that sort of journey to cloud. And the classic thing when you're on that journey is you transition a system and then you find there's a whole bunch of greyware that depends on the thing that you've just transitioned and suddenly doesn't work. And that can kill your journey to cloud in one step. So you get the idea. These samurai can cause problems. And within the department I was working with, the systems engineers were taught to use the Seven Samurai as kind of a checklist at the beginning of their solution process. So we thought, well, what if we use the Seven Samurai as a checklist for VOCO futures? So we could actually imagine what the future was in a coherent kind of way. So what I'm going to do now is explain how we use the various bits to articulate a future. But to kind of bring that alive, I'm going to illustrate with one of the examples, which was about an online gaming future for kids. Okay, so got the first one. Oh, crumbs. Hang on, I've been waffling on. There we go. So, first one of these then should be, there we go. So, system one then, system contents, we said that would be a narrative about the online behaviour of children and other users in relation to a kind of experience online. And importantly, it was set far enough in the future that people weren't worrying about problems of the present. So, in our example, in 2030, children love to play games online. Esports are part of the national curriculum, and multiplayer online games are a completely immersive virtual and augmented reality experience. Despite parental and societal concerns about compulsive design, because, you know, it just gets worse, children are entertained and they benefit socially from a strong community of interest. Okay, so that was our context. The problem then, the way we went about that was to think about the drivers. What was driving online harm in this particular setting, in this particular online experience? So for online gaming, what we find is children, as they are now, in the future, will be attracted to online games that contain mature themes and older players. And at the same time, bad actors are attracted to online spaces where children congregate. So how can platforms actually provide an online experience for children that's safer and more fun? Well, that's where the other samurai come in. We combine System 2 and System 3, the realization and intervention system, into a narrative imagining how this idealized future came to be achieved through the actions of various different stakeholder groups, market, civil society, and so on. So in this case, we envisage a particular platform really grasping the nettle and taking the lead and being commercially successful and working effectively with online influencers and so on. So the whole thing really took off in a very positive way. Moving on then, we have the deployed system, and that for us was a description of the online experience. So in this case, we imagined that the platforms would manage age assessment and safeguarding requirements through a tokenized, encrypted kind of output that supported an allow list for the desirability of that player. And that would subtly modify the child's experience. And during gameplay, we would then validate the age and a kind of risk assessment for that child from various different sources. Some of these can be quite subtle. If you imagine, just with things like a handheld peripheral, some sort of handheld device, you can tell whether it's a child or an adult using it just from the range of movement or the speed of response and things like that. So there's a variety of sources we can use to improve our confidence in the age of the child while they're playing. And then crucially, we're going to monitor for mood change and other indicators of harm. So, for example, excessive in-game purchases or something like that would trigger a safeguarding response. Okay. Collaboration systems then, very much we saw things like the sharing of these tokens in a trust network or the involvement of app stores as being part of the collaboration environment. And in terms of sustainment, that was very much about the industry bodies. So the gaming industry setting standards and policing that. In terms of competition then, well, this future wasn't going to be perfect. There would always be providers that will willfully create something that was risky. But certainly in this future, we saw them as outsiders. Then the benefits. The benefits were described in terms of the three stakeholder groups that we talked about earlier. And for example, in this case, it was about a virtuous circle where a great experience for the children meant that they weren't lying about their age. In fact, there are positive disincentives not to do that or to pretend they're their older brother or something like that, because that affects their gaming experience. And then that leads to a greater sense of trust with their parents and with the industry and so on. So a virtuous circle would evolve. But of course, has it gone backwards or forwards? Aha, there we go. But finally, we have disbenefits as well. So the obvious one here is who bears the cost, but then the mitigation for that would be that you wouldn't have every gaming provider having to do this every time on their own. We envisage that cost disbenefit being mitigated by trust networks. Okay, so that was the use of the seven samurais to try and build up a rich kind of perspective on what this future might look like. But what we found was that that wasn't really quite enough for our purposes. We needed to add some extra bits, not much, but some extra bits. So we needed an easy to recall kind of title to name it. So in our case, it was Playing It Safe for this particular future. We needed an engaging tagline. So in 2030, children love to play games online. And I think importantly, there we go. Importantly, we found we needed a kind of soft systems methodology style root definition that articulated the emergent properties of this system in some sort of a really easy to understand kind of way. Okay. So, the third act then, very much, we now have the task force as a chorus. And in order for them to be involved, we took an initial set of futures, and you can imagine these were quite sort of technical engineering artifacts, and boiled them down into three key futures. These were gaming, chatting and socializing, and creating and consuming content. And these were boiled down into 2-page graphical summaries that we could use in a workshop context. And in that workshop, the task force were then invited to review the futures in terms of the very principles which were enshrined in their VOCO manifesto. So that's what we did, and the outcomes massively exceeded our expectations. We found that this diverse group of stakeholders with all sorts of different viewpoints representing all sorts of different groups became genuinely excited about these futures. And we believe that's because they were able to escape from the prison of the present. They could imagine a positive future enabled by age assurance and weren't sort of sitting debating the problems which we currently face. Put simply, it brought the VOCO manifesto to life. Fourth act then, fourth and final act, finds us keen to share the lessons learned with the local SE community. But there was one further little bit of drama that we weren't expecting. So the internal training course, which I mentioned I've been involved in devising, introduced local system engineers to Seven Samurai. And the way we did that was to use a kind of classic Martin bubbles type visualization, and then to go through each bubble and explain how we could use that, what the issues were, how that could become a checklist item. And I was quite surprised to find when we were explaining that we'd use this for policy futures, a number of the people in the room said, but we've stopped using Seven Samurai. So the question was, well, why? It's really good. And the answer was, well, we've got this template with the bubbles in, and the bubbles are really small, and we can't write much in the bubble, so it's not a very rich description. I was like, okay, I think I can see what's going on here. Would you like to see, the outputs from our early brainstorming sessions? And here's one of those for the gaming example. And it was brilliant. It was one of those kind of aha kind of moments where I think it's called a gestalt shift, where people went, oh, okay, right. We don't have to put things in a bubble. We could just use it as any way we like. So for me, that was a really big learning point, because I've been responsible for this stupid training course. So there is, I think, something here about this being a classic example of unconscious bias in SE practice, but also a bit of a sanitary tale for people which are involved with training and development. That the way you present stuff to people kind of really frames it and can have a powerful effect, which may or may not be positive. Which I think brings us to our sort of reflective end of this talk. So let's just summarise. Our goal all along had been to take the momentum generated by this VOCO research and harness that to create a manifesto which would drive change through the online ecosystem. We found that the manifesto was really good. It was much more than a marketing gimmick. I know people have complained about the Agile Manifesto and said, oh, it's just marketing. But I think as an engineer, you do have to market stuff. You can't get away with it. And this was in a good cause. Crucially, it brought the stakeholder groups together in a shared vision and enabled them to be critical and critically review the futures that we had devised. And the Seven Samurai, as we've discussed, exceeded expectations. And I think the futures were credible because they were complete. And as we've said, they moved the stakeholders on from just debating the current problems. And that was the loop that they were stuck in. And of course, because of this, that built the confidence of the policymakers who were also present. It wasn't all plain sailing, though. So the policymakers absolutely hated the System 2, System 3 realisation kind of narrative. Now, as an engineer, I thought it was really important not just to present a future. I thought you had to have some credible way of getting there that was at least believable. For the policymakers, though, they hated it. They just went, oh, you just made it up, which I did, of course. But more to the point, they were saying, well, look, from a policy perspective, what you've just created is an unnecessary kind of attack vector, if you like, for detractors. So cut it out. We won't include that in our report. And I suppose that illustrates that there is a different mindset between policymakers and engineers. But on the whole, we got along pretty well. So, as my PA colleagues, Dave Morby and Tom Ogden, I think from previous sessions like this, often say, system engineers have got to do a lot more than just sit around admiring the problem. And I think we certainly did that. The Online Safety Act achieved royal assent on 26th of October this year, and it includes age assurance. And I think surely that's going to have a lasting impact. I should probably do a mic drop there when I do one more slide, though, which is the academic bit. So, on reflection, I think this study could be viewed through a lens of futures literacy. Now, for those that haven't come across futures literacy, hard to say, it's really about how individuals respond to change. So we can forecast technology progress reasonably accurately, or in terms of quantum technology, maybe not. But anyway, most technologies, we can be reasonably certain how it's going to develop, how quickly it's going to develop. What is really, really, really hard to predict is how individuals respond to that technology and how collectively millions and millions, even billions of individuals around the planet responding to that technology affect the economy, and they affect society and civil society and so on. And that's profoundly more complex. So what we're left with is, well, if we can't really predict what's going to go on, then we need leadership that can respond to the future in an appropriate way. And it's important that we help leaders kind of anticipate the future. Okay, that's my take on this. So this case study, I think, demonstrates that systems engineering and the system engineering mindset and toolset can support that futures literacy. And for that reason, I recommend to our friends from UCL out there and Loughborough, wherever, that they do some research about how the systems thinking and engineering mindset can support futures literacy. And I think if we do that, we have real potential to broaden the impact of system engineers to create a positive human future. Thank you. So, any questions?
Okay, thanks very much for that, Greg. It's not often we get a presentation that comes with the King's royal approval at the end. So that's really quite something.
Yes.
That's a stakeholder you've kept happy somehow. So.
Yes, he's very happy about that, clearly.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. So there we go. So we've got time for a couple of quick questions. So let's go to David.
Hi, David Byrne at AWE. I'm kind of interested with your stakeholders and thinking the big global IT firms, the Googles and Metas and everyone else, and how they interact with this.
In what sense?
In the sense of if I was a 7-year-old child, I'm going to go and Google and type what I like, and how your work will stop me finding stuff I perhaps shouldn't find.
Well, they're not brilliantly happy about it, but the point is it's a risk-based approach, and we're talking about safety by design. And so I hope people won't mind me using an example, but the Lego games you can get online are absolutely fantastic. Don't take an endorsement from PA, it's just me speaking as an individual. But the Lego games are fantastic because they are safe by design. You cannot do anything that's going to cause offence in Lego. You know, putting a bit of red ketchup on it, that gets banned. And the reason for that is they're really, really well designed to be safe. And on top of that, they're really, really well moderated. So that's safe. And you don't need to do anything, you know, because by definition it's safe. You wouldn't need to know the age of your users, or you don't need to know the age of your users if you're the providers of that Lego game. However, there's lots of other stuff out there that to a digital parent looks just like the Lego game, but is inherently really unsafe because they bundled in a little plug-in that allows you to do video chat or something like that. And we won't go into the whole, you know, abuse thing because that's distressing. But you know, there are things you can put into games without much thought, which can then make them really, really unsafe. And to the digital parent, you can't tell the difference. It's got a little penguin bouncing around the screen or something, you know, so what? Looks the same. So that's the whole point of this, is to put the onus on the industry to take a risk-based approach. And it's fine, you can make risky products if you want to, but what we're saying is you then have to take steps to make that safe. And you have to know, you know, the more risky your product is, the more you need to know about your users in order to safeguard them.
Okay, Duncan Kemp, Minister of Defence, also Loughborough University, but actually I'm talking about this from a perspective of a member of the Government Systems Thinking Interest Group, which is trying to improve system approaches across government and policy making. So really...
you published that brilliant list of tools, haven't you, and things?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. So one of the things that is always a dilemma is how much do we just teach people this is the technique, here are the tools, or do we just show them being used? And in particular, I'm really interested you mentioned the Cynefin framework, because we've got an active discussion at the moment of how much do we tell people, look, there's this thing, and don't frame everything as if it's a simple problem. So how much do you tell people what you're doing, or how much do you just kind of let them learn by watching?
Oh, goodness. I think it's one of those classic things where it's kind of, you know, 10%, yeah, whatever the official percentage is for learning and development. But there's a little bit of teaching, quite a lot of learning by doing, and I think what you need to provide is some coaches and so on who are available, who've been there, seen there, done that, and are good at helping people to help people on their journey. And interestingly, I found that to me is the only way you could do this. But I'm also finding that a lot of people, you know, they come along and spend an afternoon to learn about something. And in my book, that's about, well, let's enthuse them to go off and then try it out. And then we can find out and help them, you know, deal with any issues they have. And they'll be quite grumpy because they say, well, you didn't tell us how to do that. Yeah, I spent an afternoon with you and I haven't become an expert. So I think, it's a two-way thing. There's something about, I think, helping people to help themselves, but also I think the people who are, you know, participating in any kind of learning and development need to understand that there's a bit of effort involved. You've got to think it through yourself. You've got to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and give it a go. Even if that's just a thought experiment in the bath or something. It doesn't have to be in front of a client or a senior internal customer or something like that. But there we go. Does that answer the question? I don't know. I've waffled.
Okay.
Right.
So one very quick one.
Ian Hobson, Innovation Design Engineering. The bit I didn't see up there we speak about was the accountability. So when you're talking about in your the example you show of a piece of software, a game,
Yeah.
it's a nice controlled environment, isn't it? When you start talking about the publishing of information, where we have a rather large argument about where that platform sits. Is it a publisher or is it a platform? So at that point, who owns that risk for a risk-based approach?
I think the platform owns it, to be honest. I mean, they're providing the medium. And one of the, as I said, there were three of these futures, and I'll be honest, I can't remember the fine details of the creating and consuming content future. But yeah, those were the three futures. There was something about social interaction, something about creating and consuming content, something about gaming. The reason I went with gaming for the example is just that is probably the industry that's closest to the ideal now. And that's because when you play a game, you might not realise this, but the gaming companies are amazing. They collect a ridiculous amount of information about you. And it's really subtle, because it's not only about your ability to play the games, but it's also about the quality of your peripherals and things like that. So they can match up gamers to have a really good contest, so it's not too one-sided. And so, yeah, they're already kind of 80% of the way there, I suppose. If you just go that extra step and take on that safeguarding angle. So what they care about at the moment is people having a good gaming experience, and we just say, well, that's great. Well, let's make it a great gaming experience for vulnerable people.
But that one's got the link to I know who my stakeholder is. I know who my person is, like point at and go use accountable. If I'm YouTube or I'm Facebook or I'm Twitter, where I'm going to stand there and go, I just provide a platform. You provide the content.
No, you provided a risky platform.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
No, that would be my answer to that. Obviously I can't name any names, but those were the sorts of stakeholders who had the industry voice. And if we go back a few slides here, have we got the industry view here? Gosh, why do you put builds in slides? What kind of an idiot? We'll put a build in a slide. Aha! Oh, digital parents. Damn. Right. Well, there's a platform view, which isn't on the slide, but it's saying, as a platform, if I'm going to recognise and protect my child users, I want a really clear understanding of the risks they take. And there was a bunch of other ones, things like, I don't want to be disadvantaged against my competitors, and so on. So the goodness criteria that they came up with had to be balanced with the goodness criteria for everybody else.
Yeah, so the answer is, yes, you did consider it, just didn't on the slide.
Yeah, I focused on the parents, not the platforms.
Okay, Graeme, that was, we can tell from the discussion, a fascinating area. Are you around for the dinner tonight?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Well, that's your entire evening taken up then in that case. But Graeme, fabulous presentation. Thanks very much. Apologies for the mix-up at the beginning. Let's hear it for Graeme.